What's up everyone? In this video, we're doing a deep dive for Season 1, Episode 4 of House of the Dragon, titled King of the Narrow Sea. We did breakdowns for Episodes 1, 2, and 3 already. We got links in the description, so check those out if you haven't already. No time to waste, let's get going. We ended Episode 3 with Daemon slaying the Crab Feeder. After 3 long years, our two maniacs have finally won the war in the Stepstones, and this leads us to the main storyline in Episode 4, Daemon returning to King's Landing as a war hero.
Doesn't get the same screen time as the surrounding plot, which is mostly based in drama and some strange sex scenes with a couple rats thrown in, but without it, we don't have the political backdrop that keeps the episode moving.
So at first, no one at King's Landing is aware that the Triarchy has been defeated at the Stepstones. I don't think Daemon or Corlys sent a message to let them know, but I could be wrong. Anyways, Daemon makes a surprise return with Caraxes. Viserys calls a gathering in the Great Hall, and everyone nervously waits as Daemon casually strolls in. He's cut his hair and he's wearing a crown. The Kingsguard refuses to let Daemon get close to Viserys until Daemon tosses the Crab Feeder's hammer onto the ground and tells Viserys to add it to the Iron Throne.
It's a victory tour, so you can't blame him, and we know the last time we saw this guy in King's Landing, he was dead to Viserys from a political standpoint. This looks very good for his resume to take Rhaenyra's position, and he gets to hit Otto with a "Gotcha, bitch!" There's virtually no shot of this long con scheme to install Aegon on the throne someday if Daemon gains more influence in this situation.
After defeating the Triarchy, Daemon was apparently named King of the Narrow Sea, hence the crown. But he takes off the crown and bends his knee to Viserys in front of everyone. According to Daemon, Corlys is back at Driftmark, and there's 2,000 dead Triarchy soldiers staked in the sand as a warning to anyone who dares to mess around in the Stepstones. This is technically the first real victorious war under Viserys' reign, and he happily welcomes Daemon back into the fold. A celebration is then held to honor Daemon's victory and return.
He framed all this real well. Dangerous precedent and possibilities right now. Read the crowd reaction at the same time. Great move by Viserys to squash this with a brotherly hug, though I don't think he had much of a choice because of the juice Daemon had with the crowd.
The realm owes you a great debt, brother.
Alright, let's get to Rhaenyra since her story intertwines a ton with Daemon's, and that's, downplaying it. She's away from King's Landing to go on a tour to meet prospective suitors. She's hosting her own version of the Bachelerotte, and her candidates come in all ages. Some, like Lord Dondarrion, could be her grandfather. Others, like the Blackwood Boy, are far too young. Speed dating isn't going well and tempers are high. A fight breaks out when the Bracken Boy is talking shit to the Blackwood Boy, and the Blackwood Boy ends up slaughtering the Bracken Boy. Talk shit, get hit.
Dondarrion's old as shit and is most likely an ancestor of Beric Dondarrion from Thrones. As far as Blackwood goes, yeah, this kid is like 12. The Blackwoods are affiliated with House Tully and pledge fealty to them and have a long-standing feud, which explains why these two are at each other's throats so quickly.
So Rhaenyra's fed up with all this shit and decides to head back to King's Landing, ending her tour 2 months early, and this is when Daemon makes his surprise return from the Stepstones.
This scene went under the radar the first time I watched, but it does reveal quite a bit. You look around the circle and we can see Daemon and Rhaenyra have instant mutual respect. Alicent has definitely been schooled on this by her dad and isn't showing any warmth toward Daemon the Conqueror.
Would you like to see the tapestry?
Viserys is usually nice to Alicent, but holy shit, goddamn, that line was pretty cold. Viserys is just trying to bro down and appears to have quickly forgotten Daemon's prior transgressions, while Rhaenyra and Alicent keep their bond alive. They're both overlooked at times due to the fact that they're women in this society, and you can see the commiseration / support for each other.
Rhaenyra and Daemon do some catching up, and she complains to him about her current situation during the welcome back party. The whole concept of forced marriage doesn't sit right with her. Daemon gets it, but tells her everyone's gotta do it. Even he himself was forced to marry Lady Rhea of the Vale for political reasons.
He speaks about Lady Rhea like she's the worst creature on earth at the same time. These arranged marriages don't seem to have a super high success rate. They should probably have an alternative way to marry in Westeros, where you just play an old school version of Date My Mom or Flavor of Love.
She's a fucking fake bitch, Flav. Bye, pumpkin.
Yeah, and Daemon also tells her that marriage is just merely a label. Do whatever the fuck you want to do. Rhaenyra counters by saying it's different for women. Marriage can be a death sentence. Ultimately, she's right since women have to give birth, and her own mother Emma died during this process.
Fair callback by Rhaenyra. You get some weird vibes between these two during the scene, and you compound that with Daemon giving some highly questionable life advice. This is like when you have a couple drinks at the party and go talk to your older cousin fresh off a divorce. Then he goes on a rant about how great it is to be single again while simultaneously complaining about his child support payments, right before he tosses down another whiskey and coke.
So that night, as Rhaenyra retires to her chambers, she finds some clothes and a note left for her. The note is a handwritten map illustrating a secret passage from a room out of the castle. She changes into the clothes and goes down the secret passage that leads through the dragon worship room where Daemon is cloaked up and waiting for her. This leads to a pretty wild adventure. Daemon says nothing while leading Rhaenyra through the sketchiest but most exciting parts of King's Landing. We see debauchery everywhere. Their disguises conceal their identity, and Daemon also passes Rhaenyra some booze. Eventually, they stop and watch a play that is a parody of Viserys naming Rhaenyra the heir. The crowd boos when Rhaenyra's name is brought up, and it's clear that they believe that young Aegon should be the heir since he's a boy. Rhaenyra shrugs off the hate, but Daemon says it's important to get the common folk on your side if you intend to rule them.
It is an interesting choice by Daemon to play on Rhaenyra's anger and insecurities, because he's too smart not to know exactly what play he's going to walk her by. He makes great points though. You do need to get these people on your side, because if you don't, we are looking at a little Aegon appearance sooner or later on the throne.
Rhaenyra then ends up getting into some trouble by stealing food and actually runs into Sir Harwin, who lets her go when he realizes who she is. Uncle and niece continue their adventure where Daemon eventually takes her to basically a strip club, brothel, pleasure house environment. Without saying a word, Daemon leads Rhaenyra to an area where everyone is basically having sex. At this point, Rhaenyra is no longer in disguise since Daemon pulled her hat off. She's so mesmerized by what's going on that she doesn't even realize it.
A messed up move on Daemon's part, and we as the audience get a bigger clue here as to what's about to go down.
Out of nowhere, Daemon makes a move on Rhaenyra and they start kissing. This scene's pretty out of control. As Daemon is kissing Rhaenyra and undressing her against the wall, he suddenly stops and is no longer interested. Without saying a word, he storms off, leaving Rhaenyra basically naked and alone. I think Daemon might have some sort of erectile dysfunction, but hey, I'm not a penile expert unless it's my own.
It's either what you mentioned, Chen, or he's playing some kind of power dynamic with her, which would be even more messed up.
As she returns to the castle, she's spotted by a small boy who is a spy for Otto. This isn't good. But hey, Rhaenyra is now both upset since she was shunned by her uncle, but also worked up. She storms back into her room, which surprises Criston Cole since he never saw her leave. As Cole checks on her, she steals his helmet and seduces him. I think this is the first time for both of them, I believe, so pretty monumental moment. You never forget the day you lose your virginity, man. Never. Yeah, technically Cole is the rebound guy, but trust me, it's infinitely better than her sleeping with her uncle.
Right, we're certainly riding with the lesser of two evils here. The Cole hookup was predictable to me just based on what we'd seen them conversate about at the hunt and the tone of their interaction so far.
Were you ever betrothed to Criston?
I had an adventurous youth when my father served at Blackhaven.
Right on the heels of the Daemon scene, this carries more weight for us. Like, she was just corrupted and definitely confused by what occurred back there, so now she's taking some agency back and doing what she wants to do.
Now, obviously Rhaenyra was spotted having sex with Daemon, so the gossip is going to reach the castle. But before we dive into the ramifications from that scandalous event, let's quickly touch on what Alicent has been up to during this time. She's recently had her second child and is just living the wife life. Her and Rhaenyra seem to be on better terms at this point, still not as close as they once were. Alicent is jealous that Rhaenyra gets so many potential suitors to choose from. Rhaenyra still thinks it's forced servitude. She's not wrong, but she has a soft spot since Alicent is essentially in that current role, stuck pumping out heirs for Viserys. Alicent is very lonely and isolated at this point. At Daemon's homecoming, both Rhaenyra and Alicent admit to each other that they've missed one another.
Watching this through again, I never realized how closed off these two were from a social perspective. Not a lot of allies close to their age or any camaraderie besides each other.
Alicent is also helping to take care of Viserys' infection, and the wounds aren't healing. This also means that she needs to have sex with Viserys whenever he pleases. It's gotta be rough banging that old infected man.
Interesting choice to run that right before the Rhaenyra and Daemon scene. Rhaenyra is basically getting groomed by her uncle and eventually hooking up with him. You're gonna get a visceral feeling of disgust from the audience. This is also an analogy for when you have kids at an early age, but your other friends still go out and party. The rats reappearing on top of the bed creep me the hell out. possibly a symbol for the decay of Viserys in his reign. Rats tend to crowd around disease and death. Then there are the connections to characters that might appear in a later season, as well as a tie-in to spies that we investigate later in this review.
Yeah, baby!
So bitch-ass Otto gets the word from his little spy about Rhaenyra and Daemon's scandal, and he immediately tells Viserys. Snitching ultimately backfires since Otto has no concrete proof. There were no cameras back then, so I don't know how you even get proof. Obviously, Viserys knows that Otto was telling the truth, since Rhaenyra was always rebellious, and Daemon is a degenerate, and they're both Targaryens, and well, you know how Targaryens do.
Otto's spy in this situation reminds me a lot of Varys and the network of spies that he leveraged throughout King's Landing during Thrones, just trying to stir some shit up.
Even though what Daemon and Rhaenyra did was pretty bad, Viserys is still much more disgusted with how much of a snitch Otto is. He's really spending his time and resources trying to catch Rhaenyra slipping up. He kicks Otto out while he thinks about what to do. Also, Alicent happens to be eavesdropping during this convo. She must either have some knowledge of the secret tunnels and passageways in the castle as well, or maybe Viserys just doesn't realize that she's in the room. This leads to her confronting Rhaenyra, and even though Rhaenyra looks like a guilty dog, she's able to convince Alicent that she's innocent. Rhaenyra's strategy for denial isn't half bad. She admits that she went out into the city with Daemon, but says she drank wine and that's it. When she presses Alicent on her source, Alicent admits that someone told Otto about this. This means that Otto is relying on the word of someone else and making these accusations without proof, which is very dangerous. Rhaenyra reverses the situation and gets mad that Alicent is relying on mere rumor. This puts Alicent on her heels and makes her reconsider. Rhaenyra then swears on her mother that she didn't do anything. Alicent accepts this explanation and believes Rhaenyra. Wow.
Rhaenyra going with the tried and true strategy of telling a sketchy half-truth
I haven't seen him in years. He took me into the city for some fun.
and then getting super offended when somebody tries to question it.
This is a vile accusation.
Textbook manipulating executed. Honestly, I love that Rhaenyra's character is morally ambiguous at some points in this season. It makes for a more rewarding character analysis and back and forth. They made us hate Otto first, so it's more fun to root for her regardless, yet she has her own flaws. Ironically, it's the first time Rhaenyra has really strayed from the path, whereas Otto has been up to no good for a minute. Classic boy who cried wolf scenario.
Meanwhile, Viserys is pissed. He first calls Daemon in to yell at him and nearly kills him. Both of them know that Daemon is guilty as fuck. Daemon says he'll take Rhaenyra as his wife and they'll return the house to their proper glory.
Once again, Daemon is on his Targaryen white hair nationalism grind. He's also not stupid enough to not realize how different the experience is of running through the red light district with his brother back in the day and publicly coming on to Rhaenyra in the middle of a brothel are.
Viserys realizes that Daemon's entire plan was to sully Rhaenyra's image so that no other lord would want to marry her. This would allow Daemon to be the only one to marry her and position himself for the throne. Viserys spares Daemon's life, but banishes him to the Vale.
The differences between Daemon and Viserys' point of view on leadership, would either of these guys actually be a good king?
Not really.
We know Viserys isn't great, but he has this Jimmy Carter thing where we still know he's a nice guy. Daemon's cruelty is a massive red flag.
Viserys then calls Rhaenyra in to yell at her for fucking Daemon. Rhaenyra denies it, but once again, they both know the truth. Viserys tells Rhaenyra, no more scandals, you're getting married to Laenor Velaryon. He's still maintaining Rhaenyra as the heir though. Oh, quick thing to mention, the reason why Viserys chooses Laenor is mainly for strategic reasons. Remember in the previous episode, Lionel Strong suggested that Laenor would be the best match for Rhaenyra? Viserys didn't take him that seriously at the time, but recent actions from Lord Corlys have forced Viserys into action. After winning the war in the Stepstones, Lord Corlys is now looking to build alliances elsewhere. The recent rumor is that he's trying to marry his daughter Laena with the son of the Sea Lord of Braavos, one of the Free Cities. A Free Cities House Velaryon alliance would be bad for business, so marrying Rhaenyra with Laenor is Viserys' only move to avoid a disaster.
That happens and you officially lose any kind of nautical advantage or even pathway to advancement, which could end up in your ports getting choked off in the long run. Add that to the giant list of consequences for marrying Alicent. Corlys runs hot, but he's not going to tolerate all this disrespect from the crown without making a move. Viserys invoking Aegon the Conqueror is pretty on brand. He's the guy that Daemon keeps trying to cosplay as, who also issued the warning of the winter to come, aka the coming of the White Walkers and what we now know as the Song of Ice and Fire. It's like if your family's original patriarch was George Washington if he could ride dragons. So I do get why they hype him up so much. The conversation is Viserys' last-ditch attempt to get Rhaenyra to have some long-term perspective. She made a huge goddamn mistake. Daemon was the primary influence in all this, plus she's his much younger niece, which still feels weird. There's interesting insight to the consequences of being born a woman that Rhaenyra brings up, and she is right.
Were I born a man, I could bear two men if I wanted. I could father a dozen bastards.
But so is Viserys.
You are my political headache.
Rhaenyra begrudgingly accepts this deal, which is more than fair, but she does mention that Otto is a piece of shit who was looking for any angle to smear Rhaenyra's name. Rhaenyra will do her duty and marry Sir Laenor, but Viserys must do his duty as a king. The hand has clearly been compromised, and he can no longer serve the realm in earnest. Viserys knows that she's right. Which brings us to the firing of Otto Hightower. Viserys calls Otto into the small council room to deliver the news. He first brings up the origin story of how Otto became Hand in the first place. It was long ago when Jaehaerys was still alive and named Viserys' father, Balon, as the Hand. Balon was athletic as fuck and a great dragon rider, but 5 days after being named the Hand, he tragically died of a burst belly. I'm guessing this is a burst appendix or something like that.
Balon was a known Targaryen baller in the history books, and Vhagar was a known huge-ass dragon, who's seen quite a bit of conquest so far.
Jaehaerys then chose Otto as the replacement, and the rest is history. Viserys thanks Otto for teaching him how to be king, but he calls him out for his unchecked ambition. Otto went from being another regular dude in Jaehaerys' court to the second most powerful man in the realm in merely 5 days. Viserys wonders if Otto was even loyal to him for 5 days. Viserys also calls out Otto for blatantly using Alicent to help Viserys cope with the grief of Queen Aemma's death.
Like we mentioned a little earlier, this is where Otto's reputation of being a climber comes back to bite him in the ass, because was he really in the wrong here with what happened with Rhaenyra and Daemon? Not exactly, but reputation is going to precede him. Some of what Viserys is saying is certainly true. From a modern lens, the Hand of the King being the Queen's dad is such a gigantic conflict of interest. It would be like if the Vice President was also the President's wife's dad.
All of this is too much for Viserys. Otto has done some good for the realm, but ultimately Viserys cannot trust him anymore, so he fires him. Hey, anyone who's been fired before knows the sinking feeling in your stomach when it happens. The episode concludes with Rhaenyra taking a medieval version of Plan B. Viserys sends the Grand Maester to deliver the brewed concoction to Rhaenyra's room for her to drink, just in case she actually had sex with Daemon and got pregnant.
Alicent even vouches for Rhaenyra to Viserys, which looks great on paper, but you can't leave anything up to chance.
And since we know Daemon has been having some trouble getting it up, Rhaenyra, if anything, was at the risk of Cole being the baby daddy.
Having his kid would have been catastrophic because it leaves her with one of two options. You marry him or you have a bastard. One, due to his lack of standing, this would have been almost worst case scenario for Viserys. Nothing gained in the marriage. You mend no alliances, accumulate no new wealth. It's just a total lose-lose. Two, you can father a bastard, but you can't mother a bastard in Westeros and expect to get away with it as the heir, which would have also damaged Rhaenyra's claim.
Alright, that does it for our episode 4 breakdown of House of the Dragon Season 1. Appreciate everyone for watching. We will be back with episode 5 shortly.